Welcome back to another Touchpoint Group Video Insights session in the banking app world, and we are looking at the US Tier 1 banks, and in particular this month we're going to focus on US Bank and Capital One. And US Bank are consistently at the top of the tree, just ahead of Capital One. And when it comes down to it, when we look at it, it's amazing how you can use customer feedback to identify those one or two things that can be the difference between first or second in regards to that experience they're having. Tony Patrick, welcome. We're going to look at those two core journeys in particular after we've got through some of it. And I'm going to hand it over to you, my friend, because it's amazing how these little things make such a big difference.
Brilliant. Thanks, Glenn. And as Glenn mentioned, today we're looking at US Tier 1 banks, and that covers off US Bank, Capital One, PNC, and Truist. So what I'll do is just jump straight in and have a look at how they're progressing in terms of their engaged customer score. Now, you might recall, those who've watched this series before, is the engaged customer score covers off those customers who've given both a comment and a score. And for us, that really shows us what's happening in the market. So when an issue happens with your app, you'll clearly see it in this information here, in these charts. Now, one of the things just at the bottom there, just to have a look at what else is going on, we can see Truist at the bottom. Obviously, the combination of SunTrust and BB&T, that's taken a while for the customers to get back to normal and have that app sort of get back to a normal space. And it's doing pretty well. It's actually getting back towards 3.5 with a consistent movement up, which is great. One of the things I want to look at, as Glenn mentioned, was looking at that gap between one of the leaders globally, which is US Bank, and they're sitting at around well above 4.5 consistently, and second place here, which is Capital One. And that gap is consistent across time. In fact, over the past sort of 6 months or so, that gap has widened, mainly because of a slight drop off from Capital One. But let's look at actually what we can see is how to close that gap, because it's a bit like there's two sides of the coin, isn't there? So I suppose, why is US Bank doing so well, and what can Capital One do to close that gap? So it's the same thing essentially. So let's jump in and have a look at what's going on. So first of all, just a brief look at the scoring. So this is customers here are scoring each of these banks out of 5, and then obviously giving comments attached to that. One of the things that's interesting here, though, if I look at Capital One, 10.4% of the customers giving comments over the past quarter giving a 1. So you might think, well, is that high or low? But of course, you look just below that and you can see US Bank's only getting 2.6. And that's a fairly big gap. You're getting 8% more customers giving Capital One a 1. We've seen in others the score of 5, if you hit 80% plus, you're doing well. And this is why US Bank's a leader. They're getting 89% giving a 5. So, and that's a fairly a big difference between that and Capital One. So that it's good to understand what's underneath the hood as to why that's happening. Let's jump in further. So what we're looking at here over the past quarter is the score across 3 very broad categories, these foundational attributes, things like speed and logging in and is the app functioning as expected. So these foundational attributes are very important. It's sort of a gateway to get into the product. Now you can see there it's actually fairly close at 4.8 and 4.4. So that's a reasonably good area. So obviously there's some improvements there for Capital One. If we go along though to the next one though, which is looking at core journeys, we've got a gap of 4.5 down to 3.2. So I think there's something in there that we need to look at, because those journeys are very important for customers to actually do all the things they're trying to do in the app. So what I will do, I'll have a look inside core journeys, and break that apart into a bit more detail. I'll close off this right panel for the moment, because I'll look at that in a second, because that's important. So looking across, these journeys are some of the most important ones for customers. These are the main purpose of actually using these apps. Now, there's clearly 2 things there that aren't like the others. So one of those is depositing check by the app, and there's a massive gap between the scores that Capital One customers are giving compared to US Bank. And another one is making P2P payments. So a 2.4 average score for Capital One and a 4.3 for US Bank. So clearly there's 2 areas of improvement for Capital One, definitely in here. So let's have a look at what sort of comments we're getting through in this area of making P2P payments for Capital One. So I'll select that, and let's have a look on the right panel when that comes up. So what we can see there, I'll make this a bit wider. So what I can see very quickly is I can see a lot of red in there. So that's just a quick view. That means that these are people giving a 1 or 2 out of 5. 3s are in blue, and any 4s and 5s are sitting in that green area. But pretty quickly, I can see there's some Zelle payment problems. That's probably pretty much a lot of the problems that are going on. And so that's interesting. Let's compare that, though, side by side, or just directly here, jumping into what US bank customers are actually saying. So very quickly, you get a feel there's less of that red. There are some of that. There's some of that going on, but in general, you got these 4s and 5s, a couple of 3s, and a 1 is very rare. It's sort of every now and then you get something going on. But you can see that the Zelle payment integration is working very well for US Bank compared to Capital One. Let's have a look, though, at depositing checks. So again, there's a simple massive gap between the two. Let's have a look at depositing checks. So if I look at it here for Capital One, again, we can see a scattering of problems here with these ones. You know, the mobile deposit sucks. Yeah, it's hard to cash the checks. There's issues with that check deposit process in general. Impossible to deposit the check with this app. So again, you can just imagine the scattering of colors there. Let's compare that directly with the experience that US Bank customers are having. So pretty much it's all green and 5. Every now and then we get some issues coming through, but pretty much it's all this 5 area. So you can see there, this is where Capital One's falling down and getting all those 1s we saw previously. So what I want to do is just to cover off the end of this is have a look at that other key area, which is that the area of that whole foundational piece. So things like usability, speed, and security and reliability, those big areas. Now, one of the things I can see here, now what I might do actually, I might look at this for the past quarter, so we've got a sort of a nice perspective on this that's more recent, and apply that, because that's where the biggest gap has been over the past 6 months between those two banks. Now, what I can see here is actually Capital One's doing pretty well on usability and speed and so on, but the biggest gap here I can see is reliability. So you can see the gap is 2.6 to 3.9. Just a brief look at the types of issues that are coming through for Capital One on reliability, and what we end up seeing in here, things like there's errors, it doesn't log in. For some people it's dependable, but the app is going down, for example. So similarly, we'll see things that are coming through that are very positive for US Bank. But in summary, what I can show you is essentially, here are the biggest 3 things where US Bank can actually close that gap to Capital One. Capital One can close the gap to US Bank. So depositing checks via the app, as we saw, making P2P payments, and that reliability issue. Then they can become that global leader like we're seeing US Bank is. So
thank you, Mr. Tony Patrick. And isn't it amazing how when you actually listen to your customers and you see what they're saying out there, you can use that customer feedback and that customer sentiment to identify and prioritize those core things that you can get done to make the big difference. That's it for another month, folks. If you want to talk to us about looking deeper into your bank and your banking app and what you can do to make improvements there, we're the people to do it. Sing out and we'll have a chat. Have a great day.